Zechariah chapter 8 is a pivotal chapter in the prophetic book of Zechariah, which emphasizes God's promises of restoration, blessing, and the renewal of his covenant with his people. It contrasts earlier judgments with a vision of future hope, underscoring God's faithfulness to Israel and his overarching plan for their spiritual and physical restoration. Below is a commentary on key themes and verses from the chapter, focusing on the King James Version, KJV, text. 1. God's zealous love for Zion, verses 1-2. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I was jealous for Zion with great jealousy, and I was jealous for her with great fury. The chapter begins with a declaration of God's passionate love for Zion, which symbolizes his chosen people. The jealousy here reflects his deep, protective care and his refusal to let other forces claim his people. This sets the tone for the chapter, emphasizing God's determination to restore Jerusalem not merely as a physical city but as a spiritual center. 2. The promise of restoration, verses 3-8. I am returned unto Zion, and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called a city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord of hosts the holy mountain. Verse 3. This verse proclaims God's intent to dwell among his people, restoring Jerusalem's identity as a city of truth. This renewal involves moral and spiritual transformation, making the city a place of holiness and integrity. The subsequent imagery in verses 4-5, depicting elderly men and women sitting peacefully and children playing in the streets, conveys safety, prosperity, and joy. These vivid scenes contrast with the earlier desolation caused by exile and judgment, showing that God's restoration extends to every facet of life. In verses 6-8, God reassures the people that what seems impossible to them is not beyond his power. His promises include gathering the scattered exiles, emphasizing his faithfulness in fulfilling his covenant. 3. Exhortation to strength and faithfulness, verses 9-13. Let your hands be strong, ye that hear in these days these words by the mouth of the prophets. Verse 9. Here, God encourages his people to persevere in rebuilding the temple and to remain faithful to his commands. The blessings promised in verses 11-13, peace, prosperity, and fruitfulness, are contingent upon their obedience and commitment to him. The shift from cursing to blessing reflects the overarching theme of restoration. 4. A call to righteousness, verses 14-17. These are the things that ye shall do, speak ye every man the truth to his neighbor, execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates. Verse 16. God's restoration is not just external but also internal, requiring a renewal of moral character. These verses emphasize ethical conduct, justice, and peace as essential components of the restored community. This aligns with God's nature and his desire for his people to reflect his holiness. 5. The transformation of fasts into feasts, verses 18-19. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the fasts shall be to the house of Judah joy and gladness, and cheerful feasts, therefore love the truth and peace. The mourning fasts commemorating past tragedies will be transformed into celebrations of joy. This demonstrates God's power to redeem sorrow and turn it into a cause for thanksgiving, signifying his ultimate victory over judgment. 6. A vision of universal worship, verses 20-23. Yea, many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem, and to pray before the Lord. Verse 22. The closing verses expand the scope of God's plan beyond Israel to include the nations. The image of people from various nations seeking God in Jerusalem illustrates the fulfillment of God's promise to make Israel a light to the nations. Verse 23, where 10 men take hold of the skirt of a Jew, symbolizes the attraction of Gentiles to the truth and blessings found in God's covenant. Theological and practical implications. 1. God's sovereignty and faithfulness. Zechariah 8 affirms God's control over history and his unwavering commitment to his covenant people, encouraging trust in his promises. 2. Hope amid hardship. The chapter reassures believers that God's restoration is not limited by human perspective or present circumstances. 3. Ethical transformation. True restoration involves a renewed relationship with God and a commitment to truth, justice, and peace. For universal worship, God's ultimate plan includes the inclusion of all nations, reflecting his desire for a global community united in worship. In conclusion, Zechariah 8 in the KJV is a chapter brimming with hope and encouragement. It demonstrates the depth of God's love, the breadth of his redemptive plan, and the moral transformation he desires for his people. Through its promises and exhortations, it continues to inspire faith and obedience in God's unchanging purposes.